Hey, it's Michael. Out for a walk. Had some thoughts about logic. I think we need to remember when we're teaching that logic is fundamentally about connecting concepts to reality. We need to do that because they're not automatically done so. People can make mistakes, they can lie, you can make honest errors, you can make deliberate errors, you can try to get someone to think something is true when it's not. There are different ways concepts can be disconnected from reality, whereas perception is the way it is. Straight up, no nonsense. No editing or anything like that. It's just a matter of interpreting what it's telling us. As with refraction, that tells us that light moves in air and water differently. We need to take that into account. So that helps us understand the world. It's not misleading us, it's informing us. It's very important. Other illusions as well, optical illusions, illustrate things like that too. How the brain works doesn't mean we're wrong. It shows how we, given our nature, interact with the world. So, logic, the way it's usually thought of, is just connecting some arbitrary idea to some other arbitrary idea, and that's a mistake. Or you've got so-called symbolic logic, just relating symbols to each other. Those could be used in a proper context, but generally they're taken out of context, and those aren't what logic is about. They're stripped away from the essence, the fundamental cause of logic, which is to relate to reality, to know what the real world is saying. So when we teach logic, we should derive things. So students are actually learning logic. They're learning how to develop ideas from the evidence of the senses, which they'll need on their own when they're an adult to determine how to best eat, what is good nutrition and diet instead of what is convention or what some authority says. Same thing with exercise. We need logic to be able to define things like friendship, so we know what a friend really is, and we act accordingly to help protect our values and live in a better world around ourselves and not attack or inadvertently destroy our values of someone in our life who's going to hurt us. And we know from experience as an adult, those are things that come up. We need to also look back in history, see the mistakes people can make, understand how they're basically not properly applying concepts to the real world, and being rational and honest and looking at strictly cause-effect relationships. Doing that takes you out of the realm of reality cognitively, and so of course naturally you make mistakes in trying to achieve your values or act in the world. If you think you can jump off a 50-foot wall just because you feel like it, well, you're going to swiftly find out that that's not the case. When doing things like that, students should learn to be logical and see how to progress in ideas and progress in skills, because thinking is a skill. It's a good analogy. You wouldn't jump off a 50-foot wall. You could jump off maybe a 20-foot, but you've got to develop the skills from the ground up. You've got to be able to squat, first of all. Then you've got to be able to do a roll from a standing position. Then you need to be able to jump and roll. And you need to do these 500 or 1,000 times till they become boring to you, so you know you've mastered them. That's how you know you've mastered it, when they become boring and you're expert at it in different conditions. It's not a matter of, well, I've done it a few times and that should be good enough, or I feel like it. You need to have shown mastery in the real world. Then once you've done some jump and rolls, of course, you can get up a few inches and jump and roll, get up a foot high, jump and roll from that 500 to 1,000 times, get used to the elevation change. You can just jump and land on your feet also and start building up half a foot or a foot at a time, 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, up to 6, 10 feet. Each time making sure you're rolling 500 or 1,000 times to really get it in your system. That's the idea we should use in teaching in general, develop from the ground up, teach logical thinking like that as a skill. In education, some of it's done to some extent naturally. We got to go through arithmetic before we get to algebra, before we get to algebra 2. We got to go through some shapes before we get to geometry. Then we can connect algebra and geometry in pre-cal, and from there we can develop into calculus with some new concepts and then move on. There's a necessary logical order to that, and it should be strictly followed, and instead of just passing people on socially, it really doesn't really do us or them, the service that we want. We want to treat them right, be fair, help them out the best we can. That's why we're teaching. That's what students want, that's what parents want. So we should work on developing logical skills like that. Similar in biology, physics, chemistry, literature. You don't start out having a student write a 50-page paper. They've got to learn how to talk, how to write, how to hold a pencil. They got to learn their letters, then they got to learn syllables and words. They got to build up the vocabulary. They've got to learn some grammar. They've got to develop that into being able to write some sentences and then paragraphs and then short essays and then do a longer paper. And while they're doing some of that, they have to learn how to do research so they can integrate thinking and research into their writing. And then they can write a much longer paper. But it's got to be developed logically. So if we develop the student's ability to use logic, and we have a proper conception of logic as fundamentally connecting ideas, concepts to the real world, it'll make our job easier, it'll make students' job easier. I think everything would go smoother, people would be happier, and we'd have a much better product. We'd have much better student thinking, student minds would be developed much better in the long run, and that would produce a better culture. We'd be happier students, we'd be happier, everyone would be more successful, and isn't that what we want?